Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the canyon. Welcome back to another rainy day, which means we're inside and we have something perfectly suited for it. First of all, don't worry about Susan. Susan is just fine. She's just feeling a little gray today because we're going to need to do the close-up thing. So we need something with some more contrast on it because black parts on a black block aren't going to show up. Today is one of those rare instances where the thumbnail says like quick junk, because it's like both. Because if we're talking AliExpress stuff, if we're talking Amazon stuff, there's every chance under the sun or the clouds, whatever the case may be, that it's going to be real bad. But then you've got gems. And I think honestly, what we might have today is, I don't know, what's a junk gem? What's a junk gem? Today, what we're looking at, yet another company has opted to semi-clone the Dravtech. This is KYX. These are AliExpress, Pennsylvania via AliExpress, AliExpress via Pennsylvania, sent into the canyon for evaluation because what do we want? More options. And what do we want those options to be? Not terrible. So what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in real tight. And then we're going to break it down. I'm going to fill your brain with numbers. And then we're going to wrap it around. And I'm going to fill your brain with more numbers. All right, here are those KYX sort of semi-pretend to be Dravtechs. We're going to disassemble them in a semi-authentic fashion. I've already loosened the rod end. We have all knockoff brands' absolute favorite, which is the 3.5 millimeter shaft, which is unnecessary, but here we are. The tops are, and we've seen this before, I'm not going to bother to pop this one out because they're kind of a bear. We've already popped another one out. It's bladders, not bladders. It will behave like a bladder. It's silicone. Bleeding these on assembly is actually, it's not bad. Fill it up. Push this up to the top. We'll have the cap on about 2 threads. Push this to the top, which will be about there, which will put a little deflect on the piston. Don't push it up too high. I do it with the rod end fitted so that you can't do this. You don't want to do that. So we'll pop the piston out. E-clip retained, as is kind of the norm. Triple slot. And the triple slot, we're definitely going to get to that in a second. We have a molded, it's on the ground. We have a molded seal retainer, and what's nice is it is not handed. You can't install it backwards. It will go in either way, exactly the same. We've got soft silicone seals, and thankfully, and we are definitely going to get to more of mention of this, they are not paper thin on their cross section. But you will notice, do you see how there are 2 of them there and they appear to be radically different sizes? They're definitely silicone O-rings because they're absorbing the silicone. This one was wet. They do a little tiny little bit of wet assembly in the factory. You can see a little bit of gloss on the piston, which will aid in assembly. They do appear to be quite nicely made. And if it's anodization, it is a very thick coat on there. So the shock itself seems to be well made. I question slotting a piston of this size. Ordinarily, if we get to the piston of this size, we're going to have holes in it. And we are 100% definitely going to get to that. The shock comes with 2 springs. This spring and this spring. And I'm going to now fill your brain with numbers. The springs have an inexplicable 11.5 millimeter ID and a 13.5 millimeter OD on this one and a 14 millimeter OD on this one, which is 1 millimeter coil, roughly about a 1.2 millimeter coil. They both have 9 coils. The softer, big air quotes on softer, is 46 millimeters long, and this is 47 millimeters long. Now, this might jump out to some of you because Dravtech's Mini T's, Element, Enduro SE, all of those springs are 10 millimeter ID, which means they're not fitting over that because that thing is 11.5 millimeters, so it is almost interference fit. Meaning you're not just going to grab some springs and slap them on there. And you might say, well, am I going to have to? Oh, baby, yes. Yes, you are. I'm going to call these soft and firm. The soft spring, with its 9 coils of 1mm wire, is 3.5 pounds per inch, which is already pretty much too stiff for most anything. The firm spring, at its 47mm length, and its 9 coils, is 7 pounds per inch. 7. That's ordinarily the kind of tension you would expect from a spring that is meant to be run stacked, because if you run 2 springs like that stacked, it halves the rate because you just doubled the number of coils. So that is very firm. We have a 10.2mm ID on the body, and we have a 9.8mm, 10.2mm bore, and then the piston is 9.8mm. So we're almost a millimeter. I mean, a half a millimeter. We're 0.4 millimeters of dead space to where when this is inside, and I can exhibit it better without seals. Whoop, whoop. Like there's a technical term for that in the industry, and it's called too much. Because that amount of space, and then we compound that by not using holes, but using slots, shock oil's not going to work. It's not going to work. Particularly with how stiff these springs are. To control that spring, to properly damp that spring, heavy is where you're going to have to go. I have assembled 2. These are built and filled. We've got the soft spring on this side and the firm spring on this side. And that's a pretty good action. See, it's slowing the spring down. The spring's not just going bang and flying out. That's the soft. This is the firm. Little quicker on the firm. And this is where we arrive at an issue. There is 5,000 CST in the soft and 7,000 CST in the firm, and you could probably get away with 10,000 in the firm. For those of you who like to do the conversions, basically 40 weight is 500 CST. So the lighter shock has 400 weight in it, and the heavier shock has 540 weight in it, which is firm. But there is some advantage to that, and the advantage to that is, well, they're certainly going to leak out more slowly because they have differential fluid in them and not actually oil. They do feel pretty good, and I don't think you're going to have leaking. This is like a semi-emulsion shock because it's not an actual bladder. But we come back around to the core of the problem. Now, I looked at the body and the cap, and they are thick. There's a lot of meat. I don't know, though, because of the size of the piston that they used. I don't know if I could lay this down 1.5 millimeters, so taking off 3/4 of a millimeter per side, in order to fit just a regular SE Dravtech Losi Mini T, fit a spring like that on there. We'd be cutting close to the edit. We're talking about a 13 millimeter body. And 13 millimeter body, that number should jump out at you because your typical non-mini spring, whether it be Traxxas, Element, Axial, Vanquish, Incision, all of those are 13 millimeter ID springs. So, what I did was I said to myself, this is not tenable, unless maybe you want to use them for a cantilever. We have found a shock, I believe, on the firm spring that could probably be used in a cantilever setup. These are 90 millimeter dead, eye to eye, and that's great. We have a piston that's right about 10 millimeters. The only thing that somebody didn't work out the math on was they're using a pretty typical size seal. Like a desert lizard seal will drop in there. but it will overpack because that's a 3.5 millimeter shaft and they're looking for a 3, which means you can drop a 3 millimeter shaft with a 10 millimeter piston, like say, oh, I don't know, Traxxas. You can drop one of those right in there, put desert lizard seals in it, build it up, and you're going to have yourself a shock. Well, you're going to have yourself a shock that is built, by the way, the spring seats are aluminum, and the bases key in, they really key in, they lock in real nice. But unless your rig is 14, I would say around 14 pounds is where the softs would probably be functional. And then you have to be over 20 pounds. Like you have to be in the like 9, 10, 11 kilo range for those firms. So I'm not just talking hard body. I mean your rig literally also has a kitchen sink in it. So I noted that we have that piston. We have that 9.8 millimeter piston. And I happen to know where to source 10 millimeter pistons. Anyone who has ever bought a Big Bore or anything like that, you've got a bunch of these. So this is where we transition. In my humble, non-esteemed opinion, what we have borders close. The needle on the meter is closer to junk because these springs are unusable. And I don't know if I've ever seen a spring that comes out on Y11.5. Well, I mean, I know Y11.5 because they wanted to thread this on. And if you're familiar with Dravtechs and Big Bores, they use a clip, a C-clip to hold it in at the bottom. Meaning they don't need all this room for threading. So in order to get that threading on there and to get this cap to assemble it, we ended up with 11.5 millimeter. And then I think they designed the shock and then they sourced springs to fit the shock, which is crazy because the shock itself is pretty good. This is the failing here. We are stuck with that, either that or the unmentionable that, which, I mean, it's insane. There it is. Yeah. None of us are using a 7-pound spring. But as I just mentioned, you can put that piston, because the piston is reduced to 3 millimeter. I mean, the shaft is reduced to 3 millimeter at the bottom. It is also reduced to 3 millimeter where the piston slides on, which means any 10 millimeter piston goes right in. So old Associated will fit in there. Traxxas will fit in there. Anybody that's right about 10, and you've got a little room for error because it's actually a 10.2 millimeter bore. So what I did is I took one of those pistons and I replaced that piston with it. And then I grabbed some Vanquish rod end, because Vanquish, or Incision, however you like to view it, they'll actually fit. You don't have to machine them out. You just get it up right there. You thread your end on, and then these will lock on. And I do like a locking collar. And then I grabbed an Element Gray, because it was close on the bin. That is a 13 by 62 spring. And I did this. Now, with the Traxxas piston in there, we're a little slow because I used the purple juice. I filled it with low C40 weight. It says it on the cap. I filled it with low C40 weight, 516 CST, and I think you could go a little softer. You could get to 35 weight, maybe 300 CST even. This might be a little over damped. It actually feels pretty close, and it feels very smooth. It's like silky smooth, and you can see. Oh, I'm not talking about things I'm supposed to be talking about. There is a Traxxas bladder in there. We took the non-bladder out and replaced it with a bladder and built it like we would a Big Bore. So, you fill the body with oil, you put the bladder in, and of course, because it's 10.2 millimeter bore, they seat in perfectly. You put some pressure on the top of the bladder, you cycle the shock down halfway, it sucks the bladder in, and then you crank the cap down on top of it, and the cap fits right over the Traxxas bladders. It honestly felt a lot like building a Big Bore, and we're right here. And this shock feels good, and it is 89 millimeters eye to eye on the Vanquish short ends. If you wanted to use any other end, if you want to put an axial end, a Traxxas end, any of those, you get yourself a 1/8 inch drill bit, and you just kind of run it back and forth through the hole for the cup. You just run it in there a little bit, and it'll widen out the cup, and it'll fit right on there. So what is this? What is this KYX? Not a Dravtech. Well, A, it's not a Dravtech, and it is brought down by both these and the slotted undersized piston. This is the killer right here. So what you have is you have a shock that is well built and it is functional, but it is unusable because of how heavily it's sprung, and there's nothing we can do about it. And I go back and forth. On the one hand, I don't want to have to fill a shock with diff oil. On the other hand, that shock is going to leak out very, very, very slowly. And the seals honestly feel pretty good, especially if we're showing that amount of growth. Don't roll in the way. When we're showing that amount of growth from the silicone getting into the O-ring and puffing that O-ring up, it just means it's going to leak less. And the spacer in between the two is a big one, like 2 millimeters thick. So you can change the shafts in these and go to a 3 millimeter shaft, and that would work fine. Do I have any extra shafts? I do. So this is a shaft from a Traxxas GTS. And I mean, as you can see, you can build these shocks into something that's completely usable. But it's almost on the border of a DIY shock, because yes, functional. The amount of pressure. Nobody's running a 7-pound spring. Most people are not going to be running a 3.5-pound spring. I think we might have some rigs here that are up to like 2.5, but that's it. So out of the package, if you order these, you don't have to worry about the quality of the shock. As far as AliExpress and Amazon shocks go, it might be some of the finest quality that I've seen yet. These bodies are genuinely nice. I love that they use it's the rotatey. The plastic is inside the outer cap. Can I exhibit it with another one better? So you can rotate, and it's a plastic cap. So you can knock the ball out and replace the ball with whatever you would like. They also include Traxxas, the big Traxxas standoff balls in brass, both oddly and welcomed. I like a brass ball. But, again, we have another one. So we're 5.7 plus, closer to 5.8 if you get it right on the middle of the ball. 5.7 is kind of where we're at. And if you try to stick a 5.7 ball in a 5.8 hole, it's going to flop around. And if you try to do it the other way around, if I try to push that 5.8 into here, which is an incision end for 5.7, you won't be able to rotate it at all. So you'll just lock it into place. This is a shock that's so close to being good. So close to me recommending it. So I will give a very soft, very directional recommendation. If you're a person who is in a position of having something like this is one of my shock bins. This is one of my parts bins for shocks. If you have something that looks like this on, or around your person, and if you have a rack that's mounted on the wall that's full of shock springs, and not on the rack on the wall, you have the overflow bin of shock springs. If you have things that look like this, you can absolutely order yourself a set of these, and you can build yourself some really nice shocks. I'm not mad about these at all. And we've got a build coming up in the future, and these shocks are going on it because I like the look of them. They have good travel. 90 millimeters uncompressed, 65 millimeters compressed. That's better than the ratio most axial shocks are going to give you. We've got 25 millimeters of travel at the shock. And then you know how geometry works. When you move the axles, you multiply that travel. So this is a shock that is infuriatingly close to being bang on, but it's like a DIY do-it-yourself shock, because at the end of the day, I'm going to have all of the springs. I'm going to have the weird rod ends with the 5.8. I'll just grab another one. I'll have the weird rod ends with the 5.8 millimeter balls in them, and the cups that don't fit any other spring, because I don't have any 11.5 ID springs sitting around other than these. We'll have the little bladders. I'll have replaced most of it. I think I'm going to build them on the 3.5s. No sense in wasting them. I'm going to put Traxxas 3-hole pistons all the way around. I'm going to fill them with 40 weight with the purple juice, and I'm going to build 4 of these, and I think they will be marvelous. But, you know, you can just go on Amazon and order yourself some big bores and wait, in the front, there we go. Just get some big bores. Spend a little bit more money, get some Dravtechs. We're always looking to save money where we can. We don't want to sacrifice quality as much as we don't want to sacrifice money on something that's not worth it. And I'm sure that on AliExpress, these are inexpensive. I have not even bothered to look them up to find out how much they cost, but it's AliExpress. So my guess is in the $15 a pair range. And if you have deep bins, you will not be mad. And I have multiple sets of Desert Lizards here, so I could indeed build them with Traxxas shafts, put Desert Lizard seals in them, build a completely full-on hybrid shock. Oh, there's one other thing I wanted to test before I let you go. Oh, we can do it on this one. I don't need to take it apart. And it is confirmed. I thought to myself, these are very similar to other things that we know, and we're not wrong. This is a Dravtech cap. So you can build the full tilt boogie hybrid here. You could do element shafts, Desert Lizard seals, Dravtech caps, incision bottoms, element spring. You can go all hodgepodge, but for the normal folks, not recommended because of this. Not even because of the 5,000, 7,000 thing. I like a shock that does not leak at all. And if I can't have that, I would prefer a shock that leaks very slowly. And if you put 400 weight oil in your shocks, guess what? They're going to leak more slowly, if at all. So, there you go. KYX, not Dravtechs. Did we cover everything forensically? Was there any point that I didn't cover? Well, if there was, there's a little place down below where you can type things out. Type something out down there, and I will address it forthwith. Toot sweet. So, thank you for dropping by the canyon for just a scene of literally just the hands. We barely even got any arm in the frame today. And I am not a hand model. These things are beat. I drove another screw into the tip of my finger again. You know, you're holding it back and you don't notice, and the screw goes through and it kind of burns its way into your flesh. Those always stay for a while. I don't remember where this one came from. But anyway, we'll see you next time. And I am going to turn the loud music back on. And I am going to build 4 of these with element springs on them, because I am accumulating parts over here just out of frame for a impromptu build that we're going to slide in between the backlog of It Came From the Workbench series. It's going to be fun. I hope you had fun. We had fun. We made some shocks. The worst part of this whole day for me is going to be sitting and waiting for the diff oil to drain out of these. I have to suspend them above the bottles so that I can drain the 5,000 and the 7,000 into the bottles. All right. I'll see you next time, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Come on back to the canyon at your nearest... Ooh. Look how centered I got that. At your soonest convenience, we're gonna do some things. Go do some things. We will see you next time.